I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 225. And today in the show, we're joined by Tom Ware, a former outfitter and one of the most consistently successful mature buck hunters in the country. And before we get started, big thank you to Lacrosse Boots for their support of this week's episode. I've been wearing Lacrosse rubber boots for all of my whitetail hunts since I'm pretty sure, in early high school. And despite my baby face, that was actually a long time ago. Over all those years, I'm thinking it's almost 2 decades now, I have not yet been disappointed. I've always worn rubber boots to maintain as scent-free of a footpath as possible and to stay dry when crossing wet areas and, of course, stay warm. And my Lacrosses, they just simply have done that for me over and over while also being very comfortable to hike around in too. So if you'd like to learn more about my favorite knee-high rubber hunting boots, head on over to lacrossefootwear.com. And with that, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by Onyx. And today on the show, we've got Tom Ware. And Tom is pretty well known in the whitetail hunting world these days because of his work with our friends over at Drury Outdoors. He's been featured in their videos and shows for quite some time now. And of everyone they've had on the cast there, he's been one of the guys that have just been getting the job done year after year after year, more consistently than almost anyone else I've seen out there. And with that being the case, today I wanted to get him on the show to just get a better idea of exactly how he does that. And the conversation ended up being great. Now, Tom is a guy who owns and manages his own land, so we do spend a good amount of time talking about his management and habitat improvement ideas. And yes, he kills some giant deer that a lot of us in other parts of the country, or maybe those of us who hunt public land, we're just not going to be seeing deer like that ourselves. But I do think there are ideas and lessons learned here that we can all learn from and apply to our own hunting situations in one way or another, regardless of if that's in Iowa or Georgia, Maine, or Texas. So we cover a lot of stuff today, and we touch on things such as how he tracks individual bucks, how he learns and hunts specific deer. We talk about food plot placement. We talk about different habitat ideas. We talk about the value of having smaller food plots versus larger. We talk about summer preparations, handling the moment of truth, all sorts of interesting things. We kind of go all over the place, but I think you're going to enjoy it. So with that said, before we get Tom Ware on the line with us, though, we do need to take a little bit of time to go off on our usual pre-game tangents. So if you're new to the show and don't care about what's new in my life or my buddy Dan Johnson, you might want to fast forward about 15-20 minutes. If you are a longtime listener, though, you'll want to stick around. I do have my good buddy Dan Johnson back for our pregame show, and I gotta tell you, Dan, I'm excited because pretty soon here, like for me, 4 weeks, 4 weeks from now, these pregame shows are going to take on a much more higher degree of importance because we're going to be talking about actually hunting. Can you believe that?
Yeah. I got 4 weeks worth of exercises and losing a little bit of weight and shooting my bow before I make like a 14-hour drive to Colorado to chase some elk, man.
How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you?
Dude, this is crazy. I should be jacked, right? But I'm not because I'm so busy with life right now that it's probably good, right? I'm
Yeah.
I'm getting my workouts in. I'm kind of changing my diet a little bit. Laying off the sugar and all that stuff, and just thinking about it, but not like going overboard with it. I'll save that for probably the week of.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
jacked.
funny. I feel I'm the exact same way. I've got Montana whitetail and Montana elk, and I feel like there's just so much going on. I haven't even hardly been able to plan anything or figure anything out. So I haven't even, I'm not to the point where I'm like overly excited. It's more so like just get through the next week, and then I'll think about the week after that, and then the week after that. But it is nuts that it's 30 days away or so, and we're going to be bow in hand, man.
Of
Bow in
all
hand.
the things that I'm excited about right now, I'm going to have to say that what is getting me jacked up the most is this Saturday evening and Sunday, I will be setting tree stands and checking trail cameras for the first time.
Nice.
So I'm thinking a lot about that, to be honest with you.
Okay, so the cameras have been soaking for probably almost a month, isn't that right?
Let's see. No. All of July. So 7 weeks.
Okay, yeah, it's a pretty good long spell. So you haven't been back to the property at all, right?
Nope. Have not.
How many cameras?
I have 6 cameras out.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. 6 cameras.
How many of those will not be working properly when you go check them?
If you
Be honest.
just jinxed me, I'm driving to Michigan to kick your butt.
But you know how it goes, right? Go in with low expectations. Assume that something will be wrong, and then you'll feel okay if it's not.
So if anything's wrong, I don't know. I don't want to say it's like the trail camera or me or whatever, but I'm that guy now who I'll set my trail camera. I'll walk around, do funny movements in front of it to try to trigger it. I'll go back and check it, make sure that it's triggered, and then I'll leave.
Yeah,
right?
That's smart. That's smart.
I know. So I make sure it's working before I leave, and then from there, man, it's just, God, now that you got me thinking about that, it really just kind of ruined my night. Because I would flip out if that happened.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, how many times that's happened to me so many times over the years. I just go into it like assuming that maybe a quarter or a fifth of something's going to go wrong, whether it be the card or something. It just seems like you can't get a perfect card pull almost ever, at least for me.
Dude,
if you have
knock
enough
on wood.
cameras out.
Yeah, knock on wood. I've had anytime there's been a malfunction in the past like 3 or 4 years, it's been because I have made that mistake, not the camera.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been blessed with some pretty good card pulls in the last couple of years, aside from when I keep it on setup and forget to turn it to on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Ferner's done that a time or two on our Ohio property.
Yeah. Man,
Yeah.
you need to give Furter a break, man.
Why
I feel like
would I
you
do
talk,
that?
I feel like you talk shit on him when he's not here to defend himself.
It's the best time to do it, Dan.
You're probably right. That's what I do with all my friends too.
Yeah, me and Furter, we got work to do on our side though, because we have to go pull all of our stands off the Ohio property. And because I've been gone, I just got back last night in Michigan. So sometime here soon, we got to drive down to the Ohio place, pull all of our stands, get everything out of there. And I actually leave this weekend again for Colorado and Nevada for a week. So I'm home for 4 days, and then I take off for Colorado, doing some writing project stuff out there. So it's just not much time to get a lot of stuff done. I've got all the stuff I still need to prep on my main Michigan farms. Got to go up to our northern place and do some work up there. It just seems like the summer has gotten away from me.
Yeah, man, it's out of control how fast life starts to go. Like, man, when the memories come up on Facebook and I click on it and it takes me to the picture, and then I find myself in like this black hole of looking through old pictures. And I'm just like, I'm looking at pictures of Ava when she's a baby. Oh, by the way, this is a warning to the guy who doesn't like me talking about my kids. So you can fast forward for the next couple seconds. So
can you imagine that guy's reaction when he saw last week's podcast?
Oh, dude, I hope this isn't true, but I'm crossing my fingers that it is. It spiraled him out of control to start using drugs and alcohol really heavy again. So like that's the trigger. That's what triggered him to like fall off the wagon.
Raising outdoor kids. But back to Ava. What were you saying about her?
Oh, just like, how fast time's going, man. And then you look at the goals you want to accomplish with your family, and you look at the goals that you yourself want to accomplish and how you feel you're going to make that work. I mean, Mark, I turned 38 years old this year, right?
Whoa.
Yeah. And the knees aren't what they used to be. So if I ever want to go and start doing some of these crazy hunts, I got to do them, and I got to do them now.
Okay, so speaking of that, how is the elk prep coming? You said you've been working out, adjusting the diet. We haven't really covered that in detail. What's going on?
I mean, as you know, it is hard to prep for an elevated hunt when you live in the flattest land of all the lands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been doing my weighted packs, changed my diet, and doing a lot of workout. So I'll do this workout where I'll row and then I'll go run on the treadmill. And I mean, really, that's really all you do. I mean, I've laid off the weights a lot and try to do a little bit more cardio. And I've lost 10 pounds probably in the last month or so.
Nice.
But I will think I'm in good shape, and then I'll get up there and. But our plan is, I'm going with my buddy Ryan Iberg. And so our plan is we're leaving on a Friday. We're going to get there on on Saturday afternoon, and we're not going to hunt Saturday. I think part of the problem I had in Idaho was there was zero acclimation time. We got out of the car and we went.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to be about 3,000 foot higher than what we were in Idaho. And we're going to be, I'm going to get there, chill that night, pound as much water as I can, get acclimated, try to get a good night's sleep, get up Sunday morning, and then start it. So, see
smart.
if that helps. I've had a couple people reach out to me and tell me that's what I needed to do. We'll give it a try, man.
Yeah, it's funny. Literally just 3 days ago, I was in Jackson at the sporting goods store that you spent your your entire life savings to get a tent in the emergency situation.
And I'll tell you right now, I can still remember that conversation I had with my wife. She's like, "Your tent cost how much?"
You don't understand, Sarah.
Yeah,
it was an emergency.
I had to do it because there was no way in hell Mark was going to let me sleep in his tent.
Can you imagine if we both tried to fit in there, though, with all of our wet gear and everything?
That would have taken that trip to a whole new level of punishment.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had the Taj Mahal, though, for the rest of the trip. That was nice to get everything aired out in there. And Are you taking that for this one?
Yep. I just opened it up and slept in it for the first time last weekend with the kids since that trip. I cleaned it, put it away, and then opened it up for the first time. Worked like a charm. And so that was the fourth time I've ever slept in it since I bought it.
Well, you're going to get your money's worth after this trip, hopefully.
I know. But, dude, I'm jacked. So you're back in Michigan, huh?
Yep. Got back last night, home for 4 days, and then gone for a week, and then I'm back for 3 weeks, and then back to Montana to start whitetail hunting.
Right. So are you going back to some of that same public ground again?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the spot I hunted last year. It didn't seem quite as well. I don't know. It was pretty darn good last year. I passed on like a bunch of decent bucks, but I was hoping to see like a knock me off my socks buck, and I didn't see that. So then I was thinking, okay, maybe this place, there's a lot of these like, a lot of bucks, a lot of deer, but maybe not what I was thinking there might be. But then I went back and shed hunted this spring, and me and Furter found lots and lots of antlers and some good ones too. So now I know like there's a lot of mature bucks. I saw a few last year that were like, okay, I think these are some mature bucks. But they're a little bit different body size from, I guess, the Midwestern deer. So I had a little bit of a hard time judging sometimes too.
Yeah.
But now that we've kind of seen what's out there a little bit better, I feel pretty confident that if I put in my time, and now that I know more about the area after shed hunting and walking basically everything around there, I definitely have a good idea of how to approach it this year. So, so I'm excited about it.
Are you hitting South Dakota too, or was that North Dakota?
North Dakota, and that is going to be kind of. We're going to see how it goes. That's
going to be a patience hunt. See how much patience your wife has left.
Well, no. I think what I'm doing is I'm going to budget like 10 days to my Montana whitetail hunt.
Okay.
And I'm going to hit Montana first. But if I happen to get lucky and tag out early, then I can just swing back. And on the way home is North Dakota.
Is that a over-the-counter hunt?
Yeah. You can get it as I understand it. Unless it changed since the last time I looked, which is last year. But as I understand it, you can get a whitetail-only archery tag. I bought it online last year over the counter, and I understand that if you get it during the season, maybe you have to go to like a specific town to pick it up in person or something. But I can figure that out. If I get lucky in Montana, I will. I'll take that. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I'll figure it out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Is Furter coming with you?
I don't think he is. I asked him if he wanted to come, and he said he's going to look into it. But since our Ohio property bailed, I think he's got a little bit more flexibility with timing since we're not going to do our big trip down there. So there's a chance he might come.
I might try to weasel my way into that one, to that North Dakota hunt. I might try to weasel my way in with Furter, give him some like sob story, and then maybe hitch a ride out there with him.
It's a cool area. There's a lot of stuff to explore out there. It's fun. So I'm hoping that works out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I realize that other than that hunt, which I do have figured out, I feel pretty well prepared for that. But I got this Montana elk tag, and I'm not prepared for that in any way whatsoever.
So this is the first time I'm hearing of that. So what's the deal with this Montana elk hunt?
There's no deal at all. Like literally, I applied for Montana elk. I applied for the combo tag, so you get an elk and a deer tag. And I kind of just assumed, okay, I'll figure something out. And then I just kind of got busy with life and planning all these other things. And now I have this elk tag, and I'm gonna budget a week. But I'm going solo. I don't have an area picked out yet. I have done no scouting. I have nothing. So literally in the next week. And it's just, there's just too much going on. I haven't even planned my trip that I'm leaving in 4 days for Colorado. I haven't planned anything for it other than getting a plane ticket and a rental car. And I have a friend who we're doing this thing, and I have not picked which mountains we're climbing. I haven't picked where we're going to camp. Nothing. So like I'm living on like a week to week basis right now.
Oh boy, Mark! I can't wait to see the Facebook post. Have you seen this hiker? Like Mark Kinnion's been missing for 10 days. What? So this elk hunt in Montana, is that going to be in grizzly bear country?
Well, if I go solo, which is how it's looking right now, I'm gonna try to not go in grizzly country, just because, hunting elk, hunting anything in grizzly country is a little sketchy, let alone doing it completely by yourself. So I think, and that'll be my first solo elk hunt too. So I think a solo hunt will be really cool. I like the idea, getting back there on my own, kind of just, it's a different situation when you're 100%.
Testing yourself,
yeah,
dude.
Exactly. Testing yourself. You're 100% dependent on yourself. And I've elk hunted enough. I feel comfortable. I've done a lot of backpacking, a ton of hiking. I'm really comfortable in the wilderness, but it's always been with someone. So I kind of like the idea of doing something that's out of my comfort zone, just to see how it goes. And like you said, to push myself. So I kind of am intrigued by doing it that way. Fortunately, I know enough people in the southwestern general Montana area that if I do get something down, I could probably call someone to help me pack it out, which is what I'd be crossing my fingers for. But yeah, I need to try to look into some of these different mountain ranges that aren't yet covered with grizz, and I'm planning on doing some scouting on the maps over the next week or two, and just kind of go in with low expectations just to try to find some elk. It'll be kind of fun, I guess, because the other thing about where I elk hunted in the past, where you came with me, like, that was a spot I learned about from a friend, and like a friend took me out there, and then I started going myself afterwards, but I never found it myself. So there's a kind of a cool challenge of discovering a new place all on my own, try to figure out where the elk are there all on my own, and see if I've, figured any of this elk stuff out, or if I'm as much of a dummy as I probably sound.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's my goal. One of my goals in the upcoming years is to not only plan hunting trips, but plan scouting trips as well, to where I can go out in mid to late August to basically go look for game to hunt. Right. It's like one of my dream hunts is a high country mule deer hunt. And you don't just, from what I understand, you don't just go high country mule deer hunting, right? There's so much prep work that's involved to just locate something.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scouting. I mean, just really for any out of state hunt, but I want to be able to go there, do some camping, do some hiking, go basically scout for these animals where they're going to be, hopefully in, late August, early September, and, put a plan together. So we'll see how that works.
That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Don't show up on the trip saying, all right, I'm going to figure it out as we go.
Yeah. Right. That doesn't happen very often.
No, I'll tell you how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it's for good reason. I've got so many cool trips that I am a little behind, but I can't complain about that. So we'll see. But
I'll just, anytime you feel stressed, just text me. I'll send you a picture of my my cubicle.
When are you getting out of that thing, dude?
Dude, I don't know. Like, you know how it is. You just keep grinding until it happens. And I don't know. It's like I'm in a position right now where I really can't even think about it. 3 kids, right?
Yeah, but you are the QDMA Communicator of the Year.
I cannot wait. You know what? I'm pretty proud of that, right? However, I can't flex on that. I can't go up to like a sponsor and be like, "Give me $50K. I'm the QDMA Signpost Communicator of the Year." Like, that don't work.
No, that's exactly how it worked for me, man. That's how I quit my job. I just said exactly. I just walked up and did that exact spiel you did.
Yes or no? Take a risk on me. Yes or no? Yeah, but you had 0 kids at that time.
Oh, yeah. And I definitely did not do what you just said.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I totally understand. There's a lot of it's not an easy leap to take, but you're making good progress. It's going to happen soon.
We'll see. Yeah. Or I'm waiting for that executive position to open up within Wired to Hunt, and then I'll just kind of sidestep right into that.
There you go. We're have to see.
You're high earning executives, right?
I wish we were. I wish I had that kind of money.
I'm probably in line behind Furter though.
Furter he does have a few years of experience with me on you, but you do grow a better beard.
Yeah.
And you snuggle better in the tent. So
yeah. Last question.
Yeah.
How's your goat doing?
Oh, the goat's in prime form, man. That mountain air really helps my facial hair grow.
Yeah.
So I gotta believe that by the time September rolls around, I'll have like a 1/4 inch of stubble. Maybe it should be pretty impressive.
Are you trimming it, or are you letting it kind of go backwoods nasty?
I have to. It's so embarrassing to talk about my facial hair like this. It's so bad that you're sarcastically bringing it up on the podcast.
It's the only thing I have on you. Please, just let me have this one win.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, I have to trim it up. The wife doesn't like it when it gets too long and stringy. So, yeah, I get to.
If you don't have a goat, you look 12.
Yeah, and when I do have a goat, I look 16 maybe. So. It's funny though. I got my new passport the other day, or today actually, and they sent back the old passport with it. So I compared the picture of me now versus the picture of me when I was 15 or whatever it was when I got my first passport. And that was pretty comical to see that. Braces, long hair, like big bowl cut kind of thing. The facial hair wasn't too different, but can't have it all, right?
Can't have it all.
Can't have it all. Well, we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up this year. Elk hunts and all that good stuff. But I guess we should stop. We should break here. Get to our main event with Tom Ware, who is just a whitetail legend. The guy just, he gets it done. So let's take a break here, and then we'll get to Tom. Before we do that, though, I do want to thank our partners at Onyx. And as we were just discussing, I am in the midst of some last-minute elk hunt planning, and a big part of that planning and digital scouting is going to be done with my Onyx Hunt app on my phone, which provides me with aerial and topographical maps, plus the public land designations and borders that are going to be important for me to know when deciding where to hunt, where I can access these places, and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, once I'm actually out there hunting, I can use the app on my phone too as a GPS, which is going to show me where I'm at, where I've been, and all the other information I just mentioned, which can be downloaded and used even if I don't have cell phone service. So it's going to be a very handy tool for me in the coming weeks. And if you've got anything like that coming up yourself, you might want to check out Onyx as well. So you can pick up their app on your favorite mobile phone app store, or you can learn more at onyxmaps.com. All right, with me now on the line is Tom Ware. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
Hey, thanks for asking, Mark.
Yeah, we got to chat a couple years ago on the 100% Wild podcast with Matt. I can't believe it's been that long, but I enjoyed those chats, and I've always enjoyed watching you from afar via, everything you're doing with Drury Outdoors. So, man, I'm just glad we can do this.
Absolutely, I look forward to it. One thing is I love hunting with Drury Outdoors, and I love kind of teaching others how to hunt better, and I've learned from some of the best, and just been blessed with being surrounded by people in the industry that know what they're doing, and I love to pass it on and help other people harvest big mature whitetails and make memories. That's what life should be all about,
Yeah, I agree. So how did that start for you? How did you get to this point? Because I think a lot of people see you and the type of success you're having from a hunting standpoint, and there's like, wow, this guy has got it all figured out. But I got to believe that didn't just start from the get-go, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, I grew up, my father was a big duck hunter and goose hunter, and he paid no attention to whitetails whatsoever. And I was duck hunting with him one time, and we were walking back from the duck blind, back to the cabin, and I found a shed antler, and I was asking him, I was just a kid, and I was just like, Dad, this is cool, one of those deer broke his antlers off, and he's like, no, and he told me, he's like, no, they actually shed them, and they grow, it's a memory, and it grows every year, and sometimes they get bigger, and I was just intrigued with that. I was like, what? And he started telling me about the velvet, and all that, and as a kid, it's just so interesting to me. It was to me anyway, and so I, every time we'd be duck hunting, every now and then you'd see deer, we hunted next to the Illinois River and Pike County, Illinois. And so anyway, you'd see some deer up there, and I'd always be, instead of looking for ducks, and ducks would be coming in, and they shooting, I'm looking at these deer, And
Yeah.
So anyway, it kind of grew into where I'd always ask him in the evenings if we could go out and look for deer, and he was probably like, oh, this kid is interested in the wrong things, But it was great, and eventually, when I was in college, he bought into a farm, and there was 4 guys, and they called it 4 Guys Farm. And I was the 5th tag along. I was the 5th wheel, I guess. And we just shotgun hunted. We knew nothing about deer hunting whatsoever. We'd opening day of deer season, we'd rush out there and pay no attention to the wind or anything at all. We'd just get on like 4 corners of the farm, and I'd be in the middle or something like that. Everybody had their little place, and we weren't very successful whatsoever, but we had fun. That's how it all started.
That's awesome. So then, Who helped you, or how did you then take that next step? Because you went from just going out there and having a good time to all of a sudden getting to a point where you're, consistently having success targeting and killing mature bucks. Did you have like a mentor or some influences that got you there, or was it just self-learned?
Yeah. Well, I started getting into my cousin was kind of finger shooting a bow one day at the duck club, and I was like, Dad, I think I want one of these bow and arrows, So he went and bought me a golden eagle, and I finger shot, and I remember again going back to duck hunting. I was duck hunting coming back. I didn't start till late. I was already married. I was with my father-in-law and brother-in-law, and we were duck hunting, and we came around the edge of this tip of this timber, and there was this on the way back to the cabin again, and there was this big scrape and next to this cornfield, and it's kind of open country, not very much timber, but we saw this big scrape, and I was like, man, I'm going to put a stand right here. I've been shooting with this bow, and I bought a stand, had an old chain on, so I drove down on a four-wheeler and didn't get there till like 3:00, trying to put up this stand. Again, really knew nothing about it, put the old screw-in steps in, and got up there, and I was like, it's kind of getting that time where deer start moving. By the time I got it up, it took me a couple hours, and climbed up in there, and the four-wheeler's literally 10 yards behind me, just right by the tree, And I had my bow, and I was like, I climbed up with that, and again knew nothing. And the wind happened to be in the right way, and sure enough, here comes this buck. It comes right into that scrape and starts pawing, and my heart was just pounding. I still remember that, and I drew back, and I couldn't even find the peep sight. I was so just jacked up, and I remember he was so close. I was like, I gotta be on him, and I shot, and I knew it hit in the body, and he ran all the way up and like for a couple hundred yards, and then went over the levee, and I remember calling my dad. I had a bag phone. This is how long ago it was. So I had a bag phone in the car, and
awesome.
And I called him, and I was like, Dad, I shot this monster buck, and he ended up scoring. We found him the next day after I could tell you a long story, but we don't have enough time, we found him, and from that day on, man, I was a bow hunter, and I didn't even want to duck hunt anymore. I was all about deer hunting, so.
Man. And
so then the next step was we had a farmer next to this Four Guys farm I told you about previously that had about 1,000 acres, and he was a deer hunter, and he didn't lease it out. It was kind of before, it was when outfitters just started kind of coming around in Pike County, Illinois, and he would always let us kind of, since there was the Four Guys farm was 115 acres, so it was kind of tight with all the agriculture and stuff. It was kind of tight for 5 guys, and he would usually in day 2, day 3, he would say, hey, if you guys want to go over in this timber or whatever, I'll let you go over there. And so we'd do that, and we shotgunned his property for a couple of years, and then I asked him that first year after I shot that deer with a bow, I asked him if I could go bow hunting, and he said sure. And the next year after that, he called me up. He said, hey, I'm going to lease it out. And this was in 1999. He said, I'm going to lease it out to one of these outfitters. And I asked him, I said, what's an outfitter? I didn't even know what they were. And he's like, oh, they bring in these non-resident hunters, and it's kind of a vacation for them. They come hunt for like a week, and they charge them, and they, sometimes have a cabin, sometimes they get hotels. And so I started looking them up, and I was like, man, this would be great, and I'd like to be an outfitter, So I actually said, hey, would you, I asked this landowner, would you split the money with me if I was an outfitter the first year and lease it out to me instead of with these other guys? And he's like, you know what, I'll do that. Wow. And so that's kind of how it started. I didn't even know, really, I had only shot that one deer, and I was just such a green amateur. I had no clue how to really do anything, and so the next step is I was an outfitter the first year. I had a friend named Joe Gizdick, which he works for Whitetail Properties now.
Yeah.
He was an outfitter. If you know Joe, I had an ad in the paper for trying like in the St. Louis paper, trying to get customers and stuff. And he saw that and he called me. He says, "Do you need any help?" And I said, "Well, I can't afford any employees, you know." And he's like, "I tell you what, I'll trade you out work for, you know, putting up stands and everything for hunting rights." And I said, "You got a deal." And so Joe came over and he really helped me out. He knew he'd been working for another outfitter in Central Illinois for a few years, and so he knew a lot about just the outfitting industry. He really helped me kind of get going, and I had been working for my family's convenience store chain, and so I was kind of I grew up in the business world, so I knew a lot about business. And Joe wanted to start his own outfitting business, so I kind of helped him on the business side, and he helped me. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. He helped me on the just how to place stands, and you know, he helped me a lot on just wind direction, and just getting to know the basics. And so that's kind of how I started out. So that's
Wow.
kind of the very beginning.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you started the outfitting business, and how long did you end up running the outfitting there for?
Well, I started in '99, and actually at about 2000, I got one more story for you. The next step was Joe worked with me, but I kind of wanted to be able to go to. You can't major in college in whitetails. I mean, you can. The only thing I can think of is there's like a guiding school out in Colorado or something like that. But I was like, I want to be able to excel quickly and learn as much as I can. I've always been like that. I just, whatever I get into, I want to learn as much as I can, as fast as I can. So I was talking to this car salesman, and he said, "Hey, you ought to hire that Stan Potts." And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard of Stan. I didn't know much about him, but, you know, the TV shows were kind of just getting started at that time." And so I called Stan, and I remember I offered Stan, which this was a lot of money, and this is about all the money I had. I had $3,000, and I offered Stan. I met him at Steak and Shake, and he was really kind of, in the beginning, he was like, you know, really nervous, like, who is this kid? What's he want?
Yeah.
And so I just sat it down. I just said, "Stan," I told him I said, "I've been a duck hunter. I know nothing about deer hunter. I started my first year outfitting, and we got, I think, you know, had a few customers in, but really lost a lot of money that first year, not knowing what I was doing." And I said, I would like you to basically, it was around February, and I said, if you could just walk the woods with me this time of year, we'll look for shed antlers, stuff like that. And if you can just think out loud and just tell me what you're thinking, why you would hunt this stand or put a stand here, why would you pick this tree, how would you access it, you know, and stuff like that. You know, when you look at it, we didn't have as many deer cameras at that time, you know, so we look at deer tracks and say, that looks like a 3-year-old, or that looks like a mature deer, you know, and stuff like that. It was totally different. Or a scrape line or a rub line, stuff like that. And so that's what he did. He actually, I hired him to take me out 10 full days for that money and spend a full day with me and just think out loud. And Stan had killed, he was one of the few that had killed some giant deer at the time. I think he had Illinois second in the state as far as typical, a 201, I think, something like that. So he killed some giant deer around Clinton, Illinois, and I hired him, and he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a ton about whitetail hunting. And then through the outfitting industry, I had people in like Bill Winke, Greg Miller. I ended up buying a farm in Iowa later from Don Kiske, and met a lot of guys in the industry, and they all hunted differently. They all had different thoughts of how to hunt, and I just kind of soaked all that knowledge in and put it in my file cabinet in my brain and tried to learn from everybody.
Wow. That's a heck of a set of influences there.
Yeah, I was just surrounded myself with the right people and was very lucky to be able to meet them and they were willing to share their knowledge, and it was awesome.
Do you remember anything on those days with Stan? Was there any like light switch moment for you with him, that first, mentor that walked you around for 10 days? Was there anything that still stands out today that you remember, oh, when Stan brought this up, or this thing I learned from Stan changed everything for me? Is there anything like that stands out still?
Well, I know, if I would compare it like how Stan hunted and killed big deer compared to others, one thing Stan did is different than like Bill Winke, completely different. Bill would pay all attention to how he accessed. He would go up a lot of times he would go up a deep ravine to the tip of it where the bucks would go around on the agricultural side of it. They go around the deep ditch, they kind of walk timber just like people do. They go the easiest route. Well, that's kind of how Bill hunted. He would pay a big attention to access. For Stan, a lot of times Stan was getting invited to go to an outfitting location, and he might be hunting there, the 6th through the 9th. So he knew that during the peak of the rut, he's just got to get to the main travel corridor where the most does are, and maybe that part of the timber where they're going to be traveling all day. And he just said, I remember asking him, well, how am I going to get to this tree right here, Stan? And he was just like, don't worry about it. During those times, just get here. I don't care if you have to trample all through here. You just get your butt in this tree and sit here all day, and you'll have a good chance of killing a big buck, and so he was, he would find the tree. I remember at the end he would quiz. It was kind of fun because he would say, okay, in this timber right here, I've got a tree picked out. Now you pick out the tree you would pick out, and then tell me why you would pick it out. So it was kind of like a little test. Let's see, kid, here. Let's see if you're going to pass this test or not. And near the end there, about 80% of the time, I was picking out the same tree, and it wasn't just like, in 10-yard radius. It was like, in this 100-yard or 200-yard area, which tree would you pick out and why, and how would the wind currents flow, and it was a great learning experience for me. But that's really the main thing I remember about Stan and all the others is I usually remembered how they hunted compared to everybody else.
Man. Was there anyone else of that group that stood out as being really different? You mentioned how Bill really focused on access. Stan was all about getting the best stuff right away. Anything with like Don Kiske or any of those other guys that stands out that was interesting or unique?
Yeah, Don was. I went to. I was getting older and working for the family business and had a little bit more money. And then when I met Don was when Stan recommended, I said I'd seen the peak in Pike County and the land values go from like $900 an acre to, almost $5,000 an acre. Now they've dropped back off. But and I said, where's the next ripple effect going to happen? And, we were talking. I said, I think southern Iowa up there. And he says, I agree. And I was like, I wish I knew a farm for sale up there. I'd go look at one. He says, well, it was turkey season. He goes, well, Don and Candy Kiske got a farm for sale. So I was like, well, when do you want to go up there with me? And we couldn't schedule it other than, he goes, the only day I got available is tomorrow. So I was like, man, let's go. So we went up there, and I fell in love with this piece of ground. But Don, that's kind of when I really first started seeing. I had messed around with food plots as an outfitter, but Don did a great job of really kind of, putting a lot of food plots out and larger food plots. And, that was kind of the beginning of the food plot era. And I would say that's kind of what I learned from Don. He just had a lot of big bucks and in Iowa and not near as much pressure, and it was a little bit easier than in Pike County trying to compete against 50 different outfitters in the state. And,
right.
You had non-residents that were coming in from Pennsylvania and New York that, if they saw a 120, that was might have been the biggest deer they've ever shot in their life. And so we tried to man it. I was the first outfitter in Pike County to go to 140 inches, and I got a lot of grief from that. A lot of the non-residents, they wanted to shoot, and I remember putting a $500 fine on it, and trying to get, through that process of saying, hey, I wanted to have, I wanted to basically go from a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old, or a 3-year-old to a 4-year-old, and make that progression. And it was tough. It was tough to be the first to do that, but we got it done. And and I eventually sold the outfitting business in 2010, I think it was. So I was an outfitter for about 11 years, but I learned a lot, and not to overpressure a stand, and only put a few customers in a stand. We had 300 sets, and some stands didn't even get hunted, So I was all about just not putting very many customers in the same stand day after day, But you had to have a lot of land to do that. So
yeah, I've always thought that being an outfitter has got to be one of the best ways to get like a PhD on deer, because it's not like you're just hunting yourself. You're hunting for a dozen people or dozens of people or whatever, thinking through how to place all these different people, and then getting reports back from each one of them. So it's like you can test something and then get the feedback on it right away. So
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that
Got a lot of
must be
experience.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun because I had fully guided camp, and then I did offer a semi-guided camp. But the fully guided, I'd have dinner with the guys every night, and we'd sit around the table and we'd just sit there and talk about, hey, they saw this big buck. How did he approach? Where did he come from? And you'd mentally note that, and then did he bust you in the stand, or did he catch your wind? Did he? We didn't have of course we didn't have any box blinds or anything like that back then. If they did, they were kind of homemade platforms that we'd put in a fork of a tree or something like that, and I tried to stay away from those as an outfitter just for safety. But you definitely learn on a much quicker pace, in which that's what I loved. I loved learning. So
yeah, is there anything from that time period that you learned during that kind of like overload of information that you still come back to now today, just hunting on your own? Were there any big takeaways from that period?
I would say one big takeaway is, when you get the guys out east, there's, a high density of Pennsylvania, New York hunters that wanted to come to Midwest, and they're used to hunting all timber. And everybody wanted to go in the biggest block of timber you had, and it seemed like that's not where we killed the big bucks, I mean, sometimes we did, but it seemed like I always learned that those CRP fields and the edges of this, or a little watering hole and maybe a little bitty on the edge of a timber and CRP or stuff like that, is where seemed. And now it's all about food. I mean, that's what I do now. We can probably get into that later, but I'm a big advocate of food. Plant the food.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about what the situation is now. So you went from running this outfitting business to now you're doing your own thing. I know you've got some buddies that hunt with you and family and stuff like that, but is it right you hunt in Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri? Is that correct?
Yep. I got farms in all 3 states.
Yeah. So how do you manage? Like, how do you manage the time between those spots? Because I've got a couple spots that I hunt a lot, and I can do some property management and things, and I can do some hunting on both of those. But it's always a challenge of mine to figure out how to split the limited time I have between all these different places when it comes to all the off-season work and then actually during the hunting season. Like, how do you manage your time between those farms, both whether it is like preseason work and management or actually out there during the season?
Well, as far as hunting them and where to hunt, I usually let the deer tell me where to hunt. If I let the Reconyx cameras I put out, I let them kind of, by checking them, and now I'm actually buying quite a few cell cameras, so I'll be able to actually look at my phone and go, okay, what state do I need to be in tomorrow? The technology is crazy,
yeah.
and I know some people hate the technology with deer hunting, and they think that hunting, it should all be about not having technology, but it's still nature when you're sitting out there in a tree stand or a box blind. To me, I try to put the phone away and just enjoy, God's work. But as far as getting there and where to hunt, I do use the technology. But I let that kind of guide me where the biggest buck or the most mature buck might be, and during daylight. and then I'll try to hunt there. And maybe if there's a Reconyx camera or a food plot that is show, or a scrape or something that's showing, hey, there's a mature buck visiting often this location during daylight. He's probably the easiest to kill right now. Then I usually will kind of go, let that guide me.
What about when it comes to the work you're doing? I mean, how much? I feel like a lot of people, there's sort of this kind of growing, I don't know if it's resentment or something within the hunting world, where there's people that do have properties and they manage them and they have a great time and they're killing great bucks, and there's some people that don't have those same resources or opportunities, and sometimes they look at stuff that's going on TV and they complain, oh, well, that guy only kills big deer because he's got this big farm or he's got so much money, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right, right.
But I think that, I think there's value in looking at all sorts of different types of situations. So I think that if you hunt public land, it's important to learn from guys that hunt public land too. But at the same time, you can learn things or take things away even from people that hunt in a different situation. But I have found that a lot of people assume that folks with their own properties just have it made in the shade. Like, just because you own property, all of a sudden that means big deer are going to be there. Or just because you have a farm in Iowa or Illinois or whatever, it's just a piece of cake. But after talking to people that are in those situations, you inevitably find out that there's actually an unbelievable amount of work that goes into that.
Oh yeah.
Can you speak to that?
There's a lot of preparation, and I would say the biggest thing, I am blessed with property. I'm able to, I've worked hard, and you say all that, but I do have different properties, and the biggest thing I can say about, buying farms, and it is the biggest thing to get big deer. You can have big farms, but that doesn't mean you're going to have big deer. You have to pass the big deer. I mean, people won't believe me, but I do have video to back it up. I've passed some just gigantuan deer, and then I've regretted it later. I remember passing a big buck just a few years ago in Iowa, and he was a 5-year-old, and my goal was to shoot a 200-inch deer. Still haven't shot one. Actually, I shot one, but I didn't kill it. I didn't recover it, and he lived and grew another rack the next year. But I remember the buck I was referring to earlier was we found his sheds, and it was 192 inches.
Oh, wow.
And he came right into a decoy, and it was just like a chip shot. But we knew we had tons of Reconyx pictures of him, and we were like, he's not a 200-inch deer. He's on the best part of my property where he's least likely. He was kind of a homeboy, and I was like, he doesn't wander too much. So I don't think, and even if he does, he wandered onto a lease that I had next to my property, and it was in Iowa, and I was like, I just don't think, and the neighbor to the north was a friend of mine, and we had talked, and he's like, I'm not shooting him either. In fact, his wife had passed the same deer, and his nickname was Sly, and long story short, the next year he went from a 192, he shed his antlers at the end of November.
Jeez.
So he was sick. Mark Drury thinks that we talked a lot about it. He says I probably had a tad bit of EHD, and he just fought through it and lived. But he dropped his antlers early, and then the next year he grew a set of like 160. And so we passed him again the next year, thinking, well, he'll recover, he'll come back again the next year. Well, we actually found him dead at the end of that year, and so it was, I regret it. I was like, dang, I wish I would have shot him, but it's, you'll never shoot 200-inch if you shoot not 190s, so that was my goal, and I still haven't got there, but one of these days I'm hoping to.
Yeah, and I think it's all relative to where you're at and what's around there, right? So in your situation,
absolutely,
it
could be a 140, it could be in you pass the 130s. Absolutely,
exactly.
I'm just blessed to be in the Midwest where they can grow just enormous racks.
Yeah, that's a unique situation, but certainly something that is awesome, and it's got to be a lot of fun to be in that kind of area where you can see deer like that and follow deer like that year to year. What do you I imagine. Would you agree that a lot of your success probably is? Would you pin a lot of your success on the property work you're doing, the ways that you are improving the property, thinking through the property, strategically planning things? Is that a big part of what you're doing that's leading to this success, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's everything. I think it's when it could be anything from when I buy a piece of property. A lot of times, many of the pieces of property I've bought have been like maybe old pasture that used to have a lot of cattle running on it. And then, you can, 1 year will make a huge difference on a property like that, where all that, if the cows aren't on there anymore, then that's all growing up in a nice bedding area. The deer are going to bed there a little bit more often now that the cattle aren't there and they're getting bumped up all the time. So, and there's, a lot of fresh new growth are going to come in and bed there. And then you might add some CRP, you might add some switchgrass, just a lot of brush grows up. You might add agriculture so they have food, bedding. They got a lot of bedding like, switchgrass, and just secure bedding where they feel secure, feel comfortable. It's just a lot different than the pasture and the maybe the timber that's ate down from the cows, like it used to be. It'll just change it, and all of a sudden you'll have more whitetails living on your farm, and then, they might have not managed that property in the past, so then you have to go through years of literally passing, 2, 3, and actually literally passing 4 years. I don't believe a deer is at its potential until it's 5. And that's just me, and everyone's got their different opinions. I try to let deer reach 5 years old. And I just think I've seen them so many times, especially between 3 and 4. But even between 4 and 5, they'll just grow another. I have a deer this year on one of my farms. I don't want to say where, but he was about 160 and last year as a 4-year-old. And this year I just got pictures of him just like 3 days ago, and we pulled him off the Reconics, and I was like, oh my gosh. And he just grew, and I sent him to Mark Drury, and I was like, how big do you think this deer is? And I said, I didn't tell him what I thought it was, and he came back, he said 188 to 190 is his guess. And he said, how big do you think it is? And I said, I was hoping he would make 190.
Yeah.
And he says, I think he probably will. He goes, I think I'm being a little conservative. And so anyway, that's if I would have shot him last year, he'd have been a trophy deer, 160. Everyone's super happy with those, and even in the Midwest. And I think a 160 is, everyone can say, is a trophy deer. Something to be very, very proud of. But if I would have shot him last year, he wouldn't have grown extra 30 inches. So that's what I really specialize in, I would say, is just the willingness. I'm lucky though. I get to hunt more than the average person, and so I'm out there hunting a lot. If I only got to hunt on the weekends, or 1 day a week or 1 day a month, then I'm going to shoot that deer, and that's the difference. And I'm just very lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to your point, there is something to be said about having that time and being able to be a little more choosy because of those opportunities. But
absolutely.
Well, you mentioned like when you're picking up a new farm and you look for sometimes spots with pastures and kind of almost a blank canvas. When you've gone into that purchasing decision, because it sounds like you've bought a handful of farms over the years, are there any other things that you're looking for that have been like a good thing to have on a property when you start? Like I always want to look for X, or it's great to get a property with Y on it because it sets you up, better. Mm-hmm. Anything like that stands out that you look for?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of times when I'll look at the first thing I look at when I'm looking at a farm is the aerial photo. Usually when you're searching for farms for sale, that's how the realtors, they put them on their website or whatever. So you have access to that aerial photo. And then I'll try to zoom out from that aerial photo, and I'll look at what timber is around it. Is there connecting timbers that maybe might carry a big deer, that it might be able to carry more big deer because during the rut they're going to travel onto you? Or is your farm the only area with timber? Or maybe your farm doesn't have much timber, the neighbor farm has timber, but you can draw them in there by planting food. So I look at things like that, and then I look at the access of how, like let's say I buy a 80-acre farm that's in the shape of a rectangle or something. Usually I'll try to put my food plots. I'm big on food, like I mentioned earlier. I'll try to put my food plots usually on the exterior of the farm, no matter how big it is, and so that I can access that farm. Hopefully, I have access from each direction. That would be ideal, but that's very rarely the case. But when buying a farm, I try to have at least two spots. Let's say the north and the south, or the east and the west, or something like that. And then I'll put those food plots so that basically when you're going into that food plot and putting up a box blind or a tree stand, you want the wind in your face blowing away from where the deer are bedded. And, it sounds common sense, but, back in the day when I was hunting a Four Guys farm with my dad, I mean, that was never even considered. And I still talk to people today, like my buddy I hunt with, Clem, we call him, his name's Mike Clements, and his dad, he says they still all hunt the way the Four Guys farm guys did. They're just shotgun hunters, and they wonder why they don't kill anything. And well, a deer lives by his nose, and they know those guys are there, and so we just try to pay attention to the common sense things. And hey, if you can get into your location, whether a tree stand, a ground blind, a box blind, something like that, and hunt food where those deer are going to come to that restaurant, so to speak, and you can be there waiting for them without them knowing beforehand, then your odds are going to significantly increase. And I just try to use it's not rocket science or anything. It's just, I try to plant a lot of food and bring them to me.
Yeah. What other things are you thinking about when you're planning a food plot? Planning or planting, I guess. I mean, you talked about the importance of having these plots located on the exterior, yep. So you've got easy access. But is there anything else that you're thinking through? Like, do you try to have them tight to bedding areas or far from bedding areas, or do you anything else like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say that before you said it. Tight to bedding areas, because it seems like they will. If you want those deer, you can make them. Not so tight, and I'm not saying you won't see deer there, but it seems like you see the doe. Anybody that's a hunter, they see the does come out first, and then those mature bucks. All of a sudden, if you do see them, they'll step out in that back corner just 15 minutes before dark or whatever. But if you have some of these food plots that are tucked in tight to bedding, it seems like, all of a sudden they're showing up an hour and a half before dark, and you're like, man, I can't believe this deer's on the field during this daylight. Well, it's just, he's getting up, stretching his legs, and he's not bedded very far from there, and he feels comfortable. He's been there, and there's been no other intrusion. You're not out there throwing a football in the backyard and letting him, it's where he goes every day and feels comfortable. Maybe you have water close. Sometimes you can plant them right next to water where they're going to want to get a drink and eat. So things like that you try to think about. Might be tougher to get to those locations. Maybe maybe your block of timber is kind of in the middle, and you have to plant in the middle of your property because that's the only thick bedding area. Then do it. I would say do it. I have a farm like that in Missouri where my best food plot, my most successful area is right in the middle of my farm. So that's kind of, against the grain or against what I normally do. But on that farm, I have to do what it takes. I have to get in there next to the biggest chunk of timber and bedding area that I can to be able to see those mature bucks during daylight.
So how do you do that then without screwing things up from the access standpoint? What kind of scenario or what have you done to allow yourself to be able to get in the middle without screwing the pooch?
Well, a lot of times it's just by testing it. Like I used to access this particular location from more the northwest and used to come in through the middle of an agricultural field and I realized there's an old homestead in this farm in Mercer County, Missouri, and now I realize that there's no deer bedded up where I thought they would be. It's kind of not a super thick timber, but it's a draw that leads to this food plot. And now I just walk down the edge of it. I'll mow a path during the summer, and I kind of keep it. One thing you do. Here's a little tip is I keep my paths that I walk into the stand mowed all year. And you just got to mow them maybe once every 2, 3, 4 weeks, because if you mow them, some of that longer grass right before the season just one time, that grass gets the stems on it get real hard and crunchy. If you keep it mowed during the year, they're real soft, so you can access that path real quietly. So yeah, one thing we do is we'll just take usually a smaller bush hog or some kind of mower that doesn't have maybe 4 or 5 feet wide is all, and we'll mow our access paths, and we'll keep them mowed all year round, even to our box blinds. So people probably wondering, why are we doing that during the middle of summer? Well, it's just to keep that grass nice and soft, so in the fall when it dries up a little bit, it's just got soft stems on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of food plots, another thing I've heard you talk about on this front, you've mentioned how you feel, or you've seen on some of your places, how it seems like each food plot and the area around it kind of has a king. So like there'll kind of be a mature buck that decides to call this plot and that little area home. And because of that, rather than having one big plot that has just one king, I've heard you talk about the idea of having multiple smaller plots, so maybe you can get more of these quote unquote kings or big mature deer to stick around. Can you expand on that, explain that a little more?
Absolutely. It's actually a strategy we've really picked up on the last couple years, and in fact I did a segment on Bow Madness this year with Drury's called King of the Plot, and it was basically describing that exact situation you just mentioned. And the analogy I'll use maybe to kind of in human terms is, see these big mature bucks that are 5+ years old, if they're all dominant and they hang out together all year long until the rut, and then they hate each other. They're best friends, and they hang out in these bachelor groups. But then during the rut, they fight and they beat each other up really bad. And we had a lot of antlers, a lot of bucks on our farms, especially in Iowa. It seemed like that. I was like, man, all my big bucks get busted up. I mean, they get busted up pretty early. You got to shoot them early if you want them to have a wreck. I mean, it seems like. And so I was like, well, how do you? I guess it was because we were managing the farms and there was more bigger bucks living there. So I wanted to kind of spread them out and see, so they don't run into each other as often. And so, we have a lot of switchgrass. And the best analogy I can use, it's kind of might sound goofy, but it might help some people understand. Imagine if you had 15 Mike Tysons. Okay, everybody kind of knows who Mike Tyson is. He's a big, giant boxer that, is mean and he beats people up, Yeah. But imagine if you had 15 Mike Tysons in a gymnasium, walking around, playing basketball, whatever. And they're they have this hormones are at full tilt, and they only breed once a year, and they're all going after the same woman. They're going to fight and beat each other up, and that's what these bucks do. But then imagine if somehow you could put, almost in that gymnasium, you put walls up and almost make it like a hotel. So in essence, you're putting, so they can't see each other, and it's more like rooms in a hotel. So you might be in a hotel right next to another Mike Tyson, but you're kind of in your segment where you're separated from him, and you really don't know he's there. I mean, so in essence, that's kind of what we've done with food plots. We try to make different areas where a lot of does might hang out, but hopefully they're kind of spread out so that, hey, we've noticed a lot of times we'll sit on one food plot and the same big buck comes out, and he'll almost make a round around that food plot. Let's say it's a 1 acre food plot. He'll come around and he'll just kind of walk the other smaller bucks off the field. Have you ever seen that? Mm-hmm. And so, and then, maybe that's the 5-year-old, but he's pushing off any other littler, smaller buck, maybe 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and sometimes even another 5-year-old will come out there, but he kind of pushes them, and so one's more dominant than the other. So if you could plant another food plot just 200 or 300 yards down, then maybe that other 5-year-old will go down there, and that's what we've seen actually is happening. And so we plant, instead of one, maybe 2-acre clover field that might be half brassicas and half soybeans, or half clover and half brassicas, or something like that, we'll maybe plant 2 1-acre plots not far from each other. And it seems like they kind of, hey, maybe that non-dominant 5-year-old that was just run off the field by the dominant one might now go and kind of hang out in that other clover field, because they know that, that big old buck that's the dominant buck, he's always hanging out there, so I'm just going to go hang out over here. And that's actually what has seemed to happen, and our reconics have told us that. And so then you can monitor the reconics and see, oh, well, this buck's hanging out here more often than not. I'm not saying they never go in there. Of course they do, but it just seems like they have a favorite spot or a favorite food plot, and that's kind of how we've, maybe not a good analogy with Mike Tyson, but that's the best analogy I can come up with. We try to separate them.
That makes sense. Now, do you try to plant the same thing in each one of those plots, so it's not like at one time of year all the deer want to be in plot A, and then all the deer want to be in plot B at late season? Do you try to have the same kind of thing so they do spread out throughout the year, or is it different?
Kind of. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I do know. I can tell you that I usually try to plant clover nearly in every food plot, at least around the edges. If it's a circle plot or whatever the shape is, I usually try to plant clover in part of that field. And the reason is, I had actually a biologist come to my farm, and probably 10 years ago, and said, hey, if you want to create a deer's habit and you want them to come to this food plot every night, he goes, plant clover, because clover is going to be there year-round. Even during the winter, when they're pawing at it and snow's on the ground, they can at least get to that green underneath the snow and that clover. And clover is pretty much there year-round. So I do try to have clover in nearly, I would say, 90% of my food plots, even if it's a small amount, because I want deer just getting in the habit of coming there.
That makes sense.
If it's a brassica or soybean field or cornfield or something else, then that they might die off, or they, let's say it's radishes. Then once the radishes are gone, or the soybeans or something. Once they're gone, they're not going to come there anymore. So clover kind of prevents that from happening.
Yeah, it's that incredible perennial attraction year after year, and a lot of most of the year it just does the job. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. I've heard Mark say, and several guys, just clover it seems like when we've tracked where we actually kill these big deer, it seems like clover is king. I mean, it's just it seems like we kill them on clover. It seems like it's more than 50% of the time. It seems like they just love it.
Yeah.
It's a staple in their diet.
Before moving on, we are going to take our last break of the day to thank our partners at Whitetail Properties. And today, continuing my bi-weekly recommendations of resources put together by Whitetail Properties, I want to mention another one of their land beat videos. And this one's titled Creating Better Whitetail Habitat. And it features Dr. Craig Harper. He's a guy I've mentioned many times before, and he's one of the foremost experts on managing habitat for whitetails. And in this one, he walks us through how he goes about making decisions on how to improve an area for native vegetation. And he does this by selecting certain trees that he's going to cut or girdle to open up the canopy above this area, letting in more sunlight, which then allows deer-level food to grow. So in this video, Craig does a really good job of really, I guess, showing us exactly what he's doing, which trees he's choosing, why he's choosing them, how he's then going to deal with that tree. It's very helpful stuff. So head on over to the Whitetail Properties YouTube channel if you're interested in checking that one out, or visit whitetailproperties.com to learn more about their land specialists and the properties they have for sale. Now back to the show. So we're talking right now. It's August 1st today.
Mm-hmm.
For me, August is like a really, really busy month for me in the whitetail woods. There's a lot of work going on, and then I try to stay out when September hits to leave the area alone before hunting season. So what are you doing right now over these next few weeks? What kind of projects do you have coming up? What kind of prep work are you going to be doing here in this last month of summer?
Oh gosh, August is filled with fall food plots. It's just we're actually about a week ago we're spraying and killing all the plots that we're going to plant brassicas in. So everything like winter bulbs and sugar beets or biologic maximum, any kind of radishes and turnips, things like that. We are planting in August, the first couple weeks in August, all the way up. You can plant them, heck, in the Midwest, you can plant them all the way up into September. Well, I try to get mine in usually around mid-August sometime. I try to, ideally, if you're only planting one farm or something, I would say you get it killed down and prepared and ready to plant, and then you just wait right before the rain. And if your job allows you, you can get out just the day before that rain. Then that's ideal. Sometimes you don't even have to cultipack it in or roll it in. Some people use different. Usually with the brassica, you want to be able to. Ideally, I usually disc it up or till it up, and then I'll actually cultipack it, and then spread the seed, and then cultipack again, and that has worked the best for me. And then, ideally, if you can do it right before rain, sometimes you don't have to cultipack it in that rain. If it's going to be a strong rain, that'll just pound it in the soil, and it'll be perfect. So, but that's mainly what I'm doing, and of course putting up tree stands and box blinds or whatever you hunt out of your some people don't want to put out ground blinds this early because some of them fade or they wind will blow them or I don't think you need to. I'll probably usually wait till. It depends if you're going to hunt the rut or early season, but if you get them up a couple weeks early, that's usually good enough.
Yeah. Are you doing a lot of trail camera inventory scouting and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely,
do you do a lot of glassing right now? Yeah. Tell me about what you do on that front.
Doing the trail cameras is kind of the fun because it's the first. It's kind of like all the hunting shows start about this time. The new ones get out, and then you're checking your trail cameras to see what he grow into, or did he make it from last year? Maybe a buck disappeared, and all of a sudden he's there, and he's been there the whole time. He just didn't know, never found his antlers or shed antlers. So that's kind of fun. You feel like a little kid opening presents on Christmas morning. You're just, like, what do I got? And so it's kind of fun. And then, we're glassing fields. Don't have to do that nearly as much. I remember when I was an outfitter, that's all I did. I mean, before trail cameras, my wife were like, you ever going to come home at night? And every single night, I was out just trying to, find the tip of some velvet antlers out in the back of the bean field, and the cooler nights were always much better. I got a couple guys that I'm also very lucky to have friends and that enjoy this passion of hunting as much as I do, and they're not scared to work, and we all help each other and get on the tractors and spray. And I got a couple guys that I call them farm managers that kind of really help a lot, and they do a lot of the grunt of the work. So, but anyway, they called me last night, and they were on my Illinois farm and glassing, because I think the high last night, it got down to right before dark. It was like 67 degrees.
Yeah, it's a great night.
Yeah, and they were like, man, there was bucks everywhere. Every buck, every deer was up on its feet, and before sundown, and just in the bean fields, and just they said they saw a lot of deer.
You gotta love nights like that.
Oh, absolutely
love that summer glassing. So, what's the plan this year? Do you have some bucks that have made it that you're thinking that you want to target, or are you still waiting to figure that out, or what's your eye on so far?
Yeah, it's we have some mature bucks that we are targeting. Iowa kind of was tough last year. I had a big kill. I had 5 out of my top 6 bucks that we were hoping would make it to 2018. We found either shed season or turkey season. We found dead.
Wow.
And I don't know. We found one by a road. Of course, you think it got hit by a car. And 4 others were just, we don't know. I don't know. Again, I talk a lot with Mark Drury, and, he thinks it might have been just the touch of EHD, because we did, I can't remember, I think we had a really dried, August last year, because I remember the food plots I was stressing out weren't growing. But I think June it rained good last year. I can't remember actually. The years that seem to combine now.
Yeah.
I'm getting old. I'm almost 50, so my mind isn't as good. But this year we've had a pretty good. I know there's been touches of Missouri that have got a little drought, but most of Iowa and Illinois have gotten. In fact, on my farm in Illinois, just 2 nights ago, we got 4.5 inches. So,
wow.
We've gotten just a ton of rain this year. It should be a good growing season for antlers. They always say if it rains a lot, and the deer have less stress, and so hopefully EHD is not a. I'm knocking on wood right now as I'm talking to you, so I'm hoping EHD isn't a factor this year, but. So I don't know where I'm going to go. I need a little bit more time with Reconyx to see what, take a good inventory of those bucks and which mature bucks are there, and then kind of get a strategy a little bit closer to October 1st. Probably in the last couple of weeks of September, I'll probably really be figuring out where I want to go.
Gotcha. I feel like from watching past segments where you've been on the show or YouTube videos and everything like that, it seems like most years, or a lot of years, you're hunting bucks that you have history with, that you've seen over the years or had sheds over the years. How do you go about keeping tabs on these deer? What's your process there? And then how do you use that information? Are you really big on looking at past year stuff like Mark Drury is, or more so like just focusing on what they're doing right now? What's your approach on that front?
I definitely do. I think Mark has got I didn't say earlier when I was telling you about all those people I've learned from. I mean, the one I've learned from the most in the last 10 years has been Mark. I mean, the mad scientist, as everyone knows him. He's, gosh, you're going to think it's an advertisement, but I mean, seriously, this guy, he's got almost a photographic memory for just different tasks and strategies and things he's thinking about. And last year we tested out that new app. They let the Drury team test it out, and DeerCast, I remember we have a little Drury get together every summer where the Drury team goes down and they all get together, and they were telling us about him, and he said it's an algorithm that's basically Terry and Mark's mind and everything they think about as far as atmospheric pressure to weather conditions and everything combined all in one. And he said, really, it's just conditions we're getting from technology now from our phones, and we're putting it all together. And they put it in an app, and we used that last year, and it would say either poor or good or great conditions, and it even had hour by hour. If it would get better, maybe the pressure is rising through the day or the moon was rising at this time, and they put it all together in an app. And again, using technology to hunt, I took advantage of it last year, and it was dead on. So,
wow.
But anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. But I started telling you about Mark, and just everything I've learned from him is just it's just amazing. I mean, I used to text him all the time, like, should I be hunting high, low? Should I? And now I don't have to do that because of that app. But he's just taught me, and I've learned a lot myself. And now I've guys texting me, saying where should I hunt, and I'll say like, hey, clovers seems to be really good right now, or they're in radishes, or they're in, maybe the soybeans have dried up enough where they're into soybeans, or maybe the soybeans are just turning yellow and it's a late planted and they're not in soybeans. So, a lot of times we have just a lot of friends texting each other back and trying to communicate where where it seems like the deer are hanging.
Yeah, that's nice to have that real time network.
Yeah.
Now, on the individual buck deal though, when it comes to tracking those deer, are you keeping?
Oh yeah, that's where we were.
Like years and years worth of photos that you're keeping tabs on and looking back at, or how do you just manage all that information? Because I got to believe over 3 or however many farms you have now, 3 states at least, there's a number of different bucks you're kind of following over the years. How's it work?
Well, if you've ever talked to me before, I do believe that deer are a lot like people. And have you ever? It seems like, have you ever maybe gone with your family? You take a vacation about the same time every year, or it seems like you're doing. You almost have deja vu, and you're like, man, I feel like I've done this again. Well, it's like you're doing the same thing every year. Like all of a sudden, people are golfing and they quit golfing, they get into hunting, or it's about this time of year, or
that routine.
They're just habitual. And I think deer are that way too. I think maybe even you can combine it with when a certain doe comes into estrus. I think I've heard from deer farm managers, they say the doe will come in the same day almost every year. If they come in November 3rd, that same doe in that high fence area will come in so it's probably the very same in the wild. I don't know that for sure, but I'm assuming that. So if a certain doe comes in and all of a sudden you get a big buck on camera in a certain area of your farm, or on a public ground or whatever, and I think, I've seen a lot of articles written that say, that deer will be in that area again the same year. Maybe he lives 2 miles away, but he comes over to this farm November 6th through the 9th or something like that. I believe in that. So we'll go back through pictures in the past. If I'm on a certain farm and I have a north wind to hunt, and maybe there's 2 different food plots that I can hunt with a north wind for that food source. Maybe they're in radishes, and it's a north wind, and so I want to hunt radishes on a north wind. I'll go back between those 2, and I keep all my reconnaissance photos like in files by food plot or by camera. Like if they're in, I'll name a certain part of the timber or a pond, I'll name it Frog Pond or something weird like that, so that I'll keep that file on my computer with all those pictures from that camera from years and years and years. So then I'll go back during that time frame. You know how you can group them, and you can look on your computer and you can have it grouped chronologically, in order by date. So I'll go back during that time frame. So if I'm hunting October 1st, then I'll look at October 1st pictures for those 2 different food plots, and I'll be like, which deer was in there? Was there a deer in there? Oh, boy, look at this deer. I have daylight pictures of this buck. He should be 6 now, or stuff like that. Or, of course, you look at the most recent. That's probably what I look at first, what deer's been there on their feet, and I'm going. But if I don't have any recent deer in there, I'll look, in the past and be like, okay, and very often, that deer that maybe wandered in from somewhere else is there again during that same time, and boom, you're there ready, and a year later he's going to be there. It's just crazy. So I mean, it's kind of fun to try to figure all that out.
Yeah, I've definitely done a lot of that too, and been watching that, and definitely seems to be something to it. But something I wonder about a lot is, do you think that these patterns, I guess we'll call them, do you think it's condition dependent or not? So by that I mean, let's say you got pictures last year of this buck on your radish plot on October 1st and 2nd. So coming into this year, you'd say, okay, there's probably a good chance he's going to be here maybe around October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, something like that. But do you try to match it with the wind direction that he had last year or the weather conditions? So maybe there was a cold front last year. So do you worry about that? Or do you say, I don't care what the conditions were like last year, I still think that annual pattern exists. There's a chance at the same time.
Good questions. I usually don't try to match the wind condition. Unfortunately, I don't know I don't know. I think Mark does though. but I don't go back and look at what the wind direction was when that Reconyx picture. I wish the camera had the technology, and they do. I'm sure some of them do now, that would show the wind. That it knows that you're in, Decatur County, Iowa, or whatever, and it can match during that time what it was a west wind at 4 p.m. when that picture was taken. But the Reconyx doesn't show that right now, so I don't go back. I know that Mark has talked about in the past going back and matching that up. Now, usually, I'm only hunting that tree or that food plot based on a certain wind direction anyway. Usually, like a northerly wind, or maybe a certain food plot I can only hunt with any east wind. Or sometimes I have some that are really specific that are only a southwest wind. I can only hunt this one tree. A lot of times, if I can filter it down so it blows down that creek, stuff like that. But most of the time, you usually have a little bit better pick. Like any southerly wind will work for this tree or this box blind, and so usually I'm only going to be in there on a. So I just kind of go, hey, I know he's in this area. I really the old articles that used to be in North American Whitetail and Deer Hunting and all those magazines where deer will always walk into the wind. I know that's not true anymore. I think that people used to think that, and deer. I do know deer live by their nose, but during the rut, they're just going from doe bedding area, one bedroom to the next bedroom, going, hey, is there another hot doe in this area? I've seen them walk downwind, upwind, crosswind. I've mentally seen it myself, so I know that I don't believe they always walk into the wind. So I don't pay as much attention to that as much as when an older mature buck, the older it seems like they get, the smaller home range they have. So again, like people, the older guys, they probably don't travel as much as they used to, and they sit in their chair as they get older, and they kind of just, they've been there, done that, and they just happy sitting around home, being around family. I think, I think deer are kind of like that too. They just, hey, they know they're safe and secure in this area, this 100-acre timber, and I'm going to live here the rest of my life. I have seen, though, for some reason it seems like I've seen a few 6-year-old deer. Mark and I talked about this a couple of years ago. 6-year-old deer, sometimes I've seen them. 6 you'd think is super mature, but every now and then I've seen some 6-year-old deer will just wander. I had this buck. We just found him dead. He's one of the 5 I was just telling you about that found dead. He was 8, but at 6 years old, he literally was. He actually was over 200 inches at 6, and I was gonna start hunting him on the 25th of October, and I had a cell camera, and I came out of a meeting that I had. I was, like I said, I was going to leave the next day, and I on my cell camera, it gave me a text, and it was him with half his rack broke off at the base.
Oh, wow.
And I just went into depression that season. But anyway, he was a wanderer that year, and we saw him everywhere. And he only had half a rack, but he just was on every camera. I had probably 25 cameras on that farm. It was a big farm, 707 acres, and I had him, I bet you seriously, probably 23 out of 25 cameras. He was just one of those deer. But then at 7, he tightened back up, and at 8, he tightened back up even more, and he was just real homebody. So sometimes they do weird things, They're not always predictable. But
wow.
It's fun trying to figure them out.
Yeah, that is what keeps us coming back year after year, no doubt about that. So
yeah.
You've talked about, a lot about kind of what we're doing from a management standpoint, how you're tracking these deer. And like you talked about earlier, you've got a great situation. You've got a lot of mature bucks. You have several different properties you can hunt. You're in a terrific place that some people might feel they can't relate to. But your last season, from what I understand, is something that a lot of guys can probably relate to. I want to talk to you about that because, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think I saw that you didn't kill your first buck of the year last year until December 2nd. After
That's right.
Yeah, and I think I saw that was
right.
60 days of hunting, more than 100 individual sits.
Yeah.
That's something, that kind of challenge, that kind of frustration. I know I've experienced that. I'm sure a lot of other people have. What was that like for you? How did that, what was the mental side of that? Because at least for me, I know that's where the big challenge comes, especially after months and months of going at it. I'm sure that was tough. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah, I remember it well. I basically what I did is I set my sights on one deer, and I went after one deer, and he was a giant, and I just said, hey, I've had a lot of years where to me these stories about even tracking an 8-year-old that we find dead is just as rewarding to me. And knowing how he acted, like at 6 he went crazy, and he was like a little kid running everywhere, and then finding him dead, it was sad when we found him, but we figured he disappeared off cameras. I was like, I bet he died, and sure enough we found him. But it's not all about the kill to me. I don't have to kill a buck. Although during the season, I think a lot of my friends would say quite the opposite, because I get stressed out. It is nice when you kill one early season and kind of the stress is off of you. And I think part of that is for the Drury team, because they give us all these points and rewards if you get one on the board, and that's how they have their system set up. But honestly, to me, it started out outfitting. I love to watch others harvest the biggest deer of their life. And outfitting, of course, you get to see that quite often, especially when you get guys that are from states that maybe don't grow as big of bucks as the Midwest, and they would come in and they give you these bear hugs. I remember I had these three brothers that would always come, and they were from out east, and every time I'd have to almost wear football pads, because if even one of them killed a big buck, they would just tackle me, and they would. It was so fun. I mean, it's just so fun. And I have 3 daughters, and 18, 15, and 7. So I've taken my older 2 many times, and they've each harvested at least, I think the oldest one's harvested 5 big bucks and a bunch of big turkeys, big mature toms, and my 15-year-old, I think she's harvested 4 big ones and a bunch of does and all that. And just the smile on their faces and the excitement of others taking other, it's just, the friends, we kind of got like a group of friends that we hang out with that all help in food plots, and they all help strategize, where should we put this food plot, how, and stuff like that. And it's just, it's fun. They kind of know their member. They get their member of the text group. They maybe a group text, and hey, I got this, and they know to be super secretive too. Like we don't want the neighbors knowing about it. I'm sure they know them because they got pictures of them too, but sometimes they don't. So we don't tell. We keep that pretty tight-lipped, and it's just fun figuring it all out and being a part of a group. The camaraderie, sharing around when we're cooking at night or around the grill or campfire and stuff like that, or maybe in the summer even fishing in a boat and talking about, I wonder what this deer, we name them all too, and that's kind of, everybody makes fun of us, but when you have different, it's just a lot easier to call them a certain name versus, hey, the big 12 point, or maybe there's 2 big 10 points or an 8 point, and it's hard to imagine if you didn't have names for your kids or for, or your friends. You'd just say, hey, the brown-haired kid,
It's a lot easier to have names, that's for sure.
It's a lot easier. You just name them. So that's what we do.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate to that aspect of it. It's a lot of the process. The process is what I think is so compelling.
Yep.
The kill, of course, like you said, yes, that's what we're ultimately shooting for, but everything else that goes into it is what makes it so special, I think. So you had a heck of a process trying to get after this one big deer. What happened?
I was unsuccessful. I believe it or not, I only saw him once, but I had reconics pictures of them just over and over and over, and some were even daylight. So I was like, man, I'm just picking the wrong stand. I've never set so many stands for a deer. I literally got aggressive on this deer, and I'm usually not aggressive. I just kind of wait for the right conditions, but he was really big, and I was like, I probably got a little too aggressive. All of a sudden, he disappeared on November 9th, and I kept on thinking, well, I just don't, sometimes I didn't even go in and check the reconics pictures because you're going in right in where he lives, and I just kind of wanted to stay out of there thinking he was there. But then even after even after I checked him, a couple weeks even after that, there was just none. He just disappeared, and I don't know where he went. So finally I just kind of gave up and went off to another deer, and I've never seen him again, never found his sheds. He just disappeared. I hope we never found him dead, so I don't know, but
wow.
It was worth it. I would do the same thing again this year if he was that big. He was like, 215 big,
oh, wow.
Like world class, once in a lifetime, once in maybe 3 or 4 lifetimes, So I would do the same thing again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I've been in a similar situation, although not with a 215-inch buck, but here in Michigan, a big buck for us out here is like 130-inch, and so I've been after this buck that last year he was I think he was a 5-year-old last year, so it was him or bust here, and same kind of thing. I put all my time into this deer. I canceled other trips. I just obsessed over him trying to make it happen, and similar to your kind of deal, he disappeared on the 14th of November. And then I kept thinking, oh, well, he's got to be around. So the late season came around, and I tried for him more, and nothing. And then all of a sudden the season was done, and I realized, well, you did nothing but chase around this ghost that might have been gone for the last month and a half, and didn't fill a single buck tag because of it. So, I was in a similar situation where I was sitting there postseason thinking, should I have done something different? Should I do something different this year? But to your point, it's that chase, though, even just trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and I do want to point out, I know a lot of your listeners are nationwide, and they're not hunting the as far as the score goes. But to me, it's all about setting your sights on a certain deer. Like there was a buck. The problem is we name him now. As I said, I'm getting old. I can't remember his name, but we call him Mossy Oak, actually. And there was a picture of him with losing his velvet, and it was just an 8-pointer, and he was probably, when you said 130, it reminded me, we put him right in the 130 range. But we knew he was a 6-year-old, and he was on my Mercer County, Missouri farm, and we called him Mossy Oak, and we went, and he was a regular on this, and I was like, man, he's showing up a lot on this one camera. It was the same food plot I was talking about earlier, that's kind of smack dab right in the middle of my farm, and sure enough, we go in, and what I'm getting at is I can get just as excited about, once I set my mind on a deer, I don't care if he's 100 inches or 7 years old or 4 years old or whatever, it's just about it's just challenge, the challenge. I like going after deer that we know about. And, I told Mark last year, I was like, I've never had a giant deer walk in that I don't know because of all the technology, cameras and everything now. He says, you will. He goes, you wait. It's exciting because all of a sudden a giant deer comes in and you're like, I don't know that deer. What? Yeah. I cannot recall. I mean, a real big one. I've seen, nice deer come in that I don't know, but I haven't seen a mega giant come in, and he said, you will, it'll happen. It's really cool. But I going back to I get just as excited shooting 125-inch deer in the Midwest as I do about killing 180-inch deer. And my heart beats just as much once and he comes into the food plot or he comes into the timber where you're at, and that you might get a shot. That adrenaline, I've never done any drugs other than alcohol, But I have always said I imagine that there's no drug out there that can make you feel like that, and that excitement. It's just awesome, and that's why I hunt, and it's just as exciting too when you're behind the camera filming one of your buddies.
Yeah.
And you almost like don't want to mess up, and you want to get him on film for him, and it's almost more challenging. It's harder for the cameraman, but it's. I just wanted to point that out. I don't want people to think that the guy lives in the Midwest. He's got all these farms, and he's only after the top end deer. It's that's not the case at all. I tell you what, Scott Manifold, who I hunt with the most, and we talk about it. We still feel that same way even with does. We love hammering the does. We usually do it late season, but it's fun. It's just when you're able to harvest a deer and then eat the meat from that deer. That's something special about that. It's like you feel like a pioneer or something back in the day.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. So speaking of that, that feeling you get there when you set your sights on a deer, you set a goal, and you're actually able to get a shot at that deer. You have been in a situation now over the years where you have been able to see a lot of big mature bucks come in, and you've gotten shots at a lot of big mature bucks. So more than a lot of people, you've been in that situation that a lot of us dream about, but maybe we don't get to have that moment as many. So we don't have as much experience handling the moment of truth with that dream buck in front of us. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've been able to get good at handling that moment of truth? And another thing I'll add, I'll kind of give you a double question. I've also seen a couple past shows or YouTube videos that you were in where you missed a deer, but you came right back and were able to overcome that adversity, and like the next day killed that same deer. You were able to get over that mistake or whatever happened, and you got right back to it. So how do you handle all this mentally, whether it be on your average shot or your average situation, or when you blow it one day and you can turn around and flip the switch and get it done the next?
Well, I when I was younger, like when I'm not super old, I'm 49, but I think up until I remember making a statement to a guy I worked with, and I was like, somehow I'm able to stay calm until after the shot, and then I would go crazy. And I kind of was. I feel bad. I was kind of bragging to him in a way. It was just he and I were close friends, and I was like, yeah, I'm able to kind of have ice in my veins until that time. And then I shouldn't even have said that, because like the last 5 years, I've blown so many shots and missed so many big bucks, and it's just like the older I get, the worse I get. And so I blew it by I think bragging, or just teasing him and saying, we were just kind of jarring each other. But I think if you can, I do remember this story. I remember. I don't see Stan Potts anymore, but I used to. But I remember one time he told me, he was like, what he does to control it, and I've told a lot of people this story. He said he used to almost get mad at the deer. So somehow he would, like when that deer showed up, he would get this mental attitude in his brain over and over, like he would be so mad at that deer. I'm gonna shoot you, deer. Whatever he said to himself, to kind of keep himself calm. But to almost overcome it, whatever can go on between your ears, a lot can go on. A lot of people are like worried, and they're checking their arrow falls off the rest and all this stuff. I do try to eliminate as many things as I can. Like I use a whisker biscuit. A lot of people laugh at that too. I think it's the best. I've used it since the day it came out years and years ago. And it just eliminates a lot of things that can go wrong. If you can do that, whether you see that buck walking into your stand and you have to get on the ground and crawl, it's a lot easier there's a lot of rests now, different rests that'll hold your arrow on there instead of just, kind of resting on there. Things like that. I use a rangefinder to, put the odds in my favor so I know what that yardage is. And of course I practice a lot too. I try to practice every day, at least a couple, even if I only shoot 1 or 2 arrows, to make sure it's on. After I travel state to state, I'll shoot my bow too, because it being in the car or whatever, or different different temperatures in your cart, in your house, to back out in the cold. I just want to make sure everything is on. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's helpful, hearing about some of the things you're doing, and Stan's idea there.
Yeah, I don't necessarily do that. I don't necessarily get mad, but I've noticed, I hunted with Brick Stewart, who's on the Drury team, and he used to say, he's like, man, I remember a big buck came in, we were hunting together, and the goal was for him to kill a big buck. He was coming up to Iowa, and I said, well, there's one buck I want to shoot, and there's a bunch of bucks that you can shoot. And I can't, let me see, it was a buck called Stallback, and it was years ago. And I remember I was like, Stallback's in this area, but he probably won't show up. But I said, as soon as I say that, he will. And sure enough, first buck we see come in is Stallback. So I have to get the camera to him, and he's got to put down his bow, and I have to grab my bow, which is hanging real high in the tree. And and he was just like, I can't believe Brick is so passionate about whitetail hunting that when he sees a big buck, he's literally like a 5-year-old waiting to open that present. I mean, he gets shaken and everything. I love it. It's just awesome to see it. And but I was able to stay calm and get the shot off, and he nicknamed me the werewolf after that. He was like, man, you were just so calm. And then after I shot him, I just couldn't even hardly stand up, But I don't know. I think it's, have you ever, have you ever seen, if you're with anybody that ever gotten in an car accident, some people kind of freak out, and some people stay real calm until everybody's safe. And I've luckily been able to be one of the guys that can be calmer. Now, the last few years, I don't know, but in my younger days, I think I was able to. I got to figure out what I was doing back then and go back to that. But when I was younger, I was able to stay calm.
Yeah, it's no easy task, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I've got one last question for you, because I know we're short on time here. But okay. I want to ask you one thing here. What do you? And I ask this because a lot of the people I talk to that work, that film for the Druries, a lot of them, just like you did earlier, point to Mark or Terry as a mentor, or someone who's helped them, or someone they've learned a lot from.
Absolutely, yeah.
But is there anything that you do differently from the Druries, or that you believe differently, where they say X and you're like, no, I think Y? Is there anything like that?
Boy, nothing really comes to my mind. I will say, I've been in the industry going, I used to go on the ATA show years ago, and I've been when I was an outfitter, I went to all these shows. One thing that it's not different, so I'm really not answering your question, but I will say one thing that just came to my mind that I love about Mark and Terry that they do right is, they're some of the biggest guys in the industry, and I think when someone else, even another TV show that they're maybe competing against or whatever, when somebody else kills a big deer, it seems like those guys are genuinely happy for him, where instead of looking at it like competition, like, hey, that's another show they're competing against, they killed a giant 200-something inch deer. I think those guys are just different, and there's no jealousy, and that's the way I wish everyone can replicate that mindset and just be happy if your neighbor kills a big buck, or if a close friend of yours, or a lot of times you see a lot of jealousy, and it hurts the whole industry. And when they fight over big bucks and everything, it's just like, gosh, just be happy for them. Sometimes your neighbor's gonna get them, sometimes you are, but I've seen it ruin relationships. In within my own family of friends, I've seen guys getting fights, and me getting fights back in the day, and jealousy over it. So I'm talking a little bit to myself too, but I think I've gotten better at it by learning from those guys of what not to do, and be a good person, and try to just be genuinely happy for other guys. And that's the only thing that really comes to my mind. It wasn't not what they do different, but what they do so right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good message to end with, because this stuff is supposed to be fun. It's an opportunity to share in a wonderful activity with friends and family, and it's just, all the Facebook envy and, like you said, the jealousy. It does no one any good. So
yeah, no place for it.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. So Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This has been fun.
Yeah, Mark, I appreciate the invitation, and hopefully we can draw more young deer hunters to the sport. And that's Scott Manifold. That's, like I said, he's the main partner I hunt with now. He's got more time than Mike Clemenson, and we talked a lot about, what are we going to do? We have to pick a theme for the Drurys every year of what we're going to name a show or something. And and I just told him this year, I was like, and he agreed. I was like, let's just try to teach as many people as we can how we're successful, or what we've learned, or maybe what we've learned not to do, whatever it might be. Just like we've learned from others, let's try to do the same thing and help others to be successful. So that's kind of why when you emailed me and said, would you like to be on the show? I said, I'm not a self-promoter. I'm not out there just saying, hey, look at me with this big buck. I hope that is the message I do not portray whatsoever. I really just enjoy helping others, and if I've had some people come up to me and go, I learned, I saw you on this, and I learned from it, and that worked for me, and that's kind of the biggest reward you can get.
Yeah. No, I think that's an awesome goal, and I think you're doing it. I think a lot of people are seeing the success you're having, and you guys have been able to do a good job of helping share how you guys are able to do that. And today, I think, definitely happened again. So thank you, Tom, and man, best of luck in 2018. Hope you have an awesome season.
Yeah, keep me posted how you do, and send me some pictures. All right, bud?
Sounds like a plan. And that's going to do it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this one. As we talked about, Tom is involved with Drury Outdoors, and I do want to mention, you may have been listening in the past to the 100% Wild podcast, which was the show that I was doing with Drury Outdoors. I've had to step away from that because of other projects I'm working on, but Matt Drury is continuing the podcast with Tim Chelsvik, I think is how you say his last name. Tim, if you're listening, forgive me if I butchered that. But they're continuing the podcast, so be sure to stay tuned for that. And actually, coincidentally, I believe I just saw that Tom was on the most recent episode of the 100% Wild podcast, too. There was no communication there. That's not on purpose, but it kind of works out well. So if you enjoyed our conversation today with Tom, check out 100% Wild to get more from him, too. So with that all said, just want to remind you, if you haven't left a rating or review on iTunes, that's amazing. If you could, I would give you a high five if I saw you in person. If you told me that, big thanks in advance. Make sure also that you're following us. That's Wired to Hunt on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the YouTube channel as well. And finally, most importantly, I just want to thank you all for listening. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you being a part of this community. I mean, I sit behind this desk all on my own here every week putting these things together, and then I get to put this out into the world, and I hear from so many of you about what you're learning from these things. If you're enjoying them, that means a ton. So thanks for that. Thanks for being a part of everything we're doing here. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.